Hey guys, welcome back. It is Tuesday, May 5th. We are going to be reading through pages 120 to 123 today and completing the first chart in our reading task. So let's take a look what that looks like. Got my reading guide over here. So this whole section is from 119 to 133. Again, I don't want you to read that whole section today. Just go ahead and read up to 123 like your pacing guide says. And let's check out what we've got to look for. So our overarching task here is to describe Bradbury, remember that's our author, his use of structure to create suspense in this scene. Remember, suspense is the feeling that makes us want to continue reading. It increases the action here, your rising action, the thing that leads to the climax. So we're looking for a few specific things here. So just to be clear, this is the first chart that you'll be completing, the chart that goes from 119 to 123. So this entire portion that I've highlighted is what you're completing for today. First, we've got to identify what is announced on page 119. We'll review that together. And then we have to decipher why the author says Montag stood trying to make himself feel the shock. What does Bradbury compare the city to on 119? And why does he do this? We have to describe Montag's movements on page 120. On page 121, we have to identify the literary device that the author uses, beginning with the beetle. What is his purpose in using that figurative language or literary device? And what is he trying to show? What happens to Montag at the bottom of page 121? How does it help him? What misconception does Montag realize on the first half of 122? And what does this reinforce about Montag? Where does Montag end up on 123? And then we're just going to briefly describe the simile at the end. So your reading for today is not that heavy. However, you do have a lot of questions. It breaks it down page by page, so it should be pretty easy to follow. You just will probably have to go back and forth, switching tabs a lot as you complete the work for today. So why don't we go ahead to 119. You left off here yesterday in your reading. We're just going to pick up right here. And here was the gas station, its attendants busy now with customers. Approaching from the rear, Montag entered the men's washroom. Through the aluminum wall, he heard a radio voice saying, "War has been declared." Okay, that I know is going to be my answer to my first question, which is what is announced? War has been declared. Next up is why does the author say Montag stood trying to make himself feel the shock? So that's the next line I'm looking for. The gas was being pumped outside. The men and the beetles were talking, and the attendants were talking about the engines, the gas, the money owed. Montag stood trying to make himself feel the shock of the quiet statement from the radio, but nothing would happen. The war would have to wait for him to come to it in his personal file an hour, 2 hours from now. So let's go ahead and copy this just so that we can have it for our reference here as we explain the purpose or the meaning of this quote. So this sentence reinforces that Montag has become numb to the idea of war because it surrounds his daily life. We've seen the jets coming overhead, bombings throughout the whole novel, really. So Montag is realizing how disturbing war is, and what he's noticing that's even more disturbing is his lack of reaction to it. Montag realizes that war should disturb him, and he is disturbed to find out that it doesn't. What does Bradbury compare the city to? Why? Let's keep reading. He washed his hands and face and toweled himself dry, making little sound. He came out of the washroom and shut the door carefully and walked into the darkness, and at last stood again on the edge of the empty boulevard. There it lay, a game for him to win, a vast bowling alley in the cool morning. The boulevard was clean as the surface of an arena 2 minutes before the appearance of certain unnamed victims and certain unknown killers. So here he's comparing the empty boulevard, like a game, like a bowling alley and like an arena right before a game takes place. So I'm going to copy that again for me to reference. So Montag compares the empty streets to a game or a bowling alley. He also compares it to an arena before like big news has broken. And this big news, as we know, is that Montag is now a murderer. So because he has killed Beatty, he knows it is only a matter of time before a manhunt commences. He is viewing his ability to escape authorities as a game. All right, let's keep moving. The air over and above the vast concrete river trembled with the warmth of Montag's body alone. It was incredible how he felt his temperature could cause the whole immediate world to vibrate. He was a phosphorescent target. He knew it, he felt it, and now he must begin his little walk. 120. Let's see, I know I'm looking for something on 120, specifically his movements. 3 blocks away, a few headlights glared. Montag drew a deep breath. His lungs were like burning brooms in his chest. His mouth was sucked dry from running. His throat tasted of bloody iron, and there was rusted steel at his feet. In his feet, excuse me. What about those lights there? Once you started walking, you'd have to gauge how fast those beetles could make it down here. So what he's talking about is the police cars. Well, how far was it to the other curb? It seemed like 100 yards. Probably not 100, but figure for that anyway. Figured that with him going very slowly at a nice stroll, it might take as much as 30 seconds, 40 seconds to walk all the way. Beetles, once started, they could leave 3 blocks behind them in about 15 seconds. So even in halfway across, he started to run. Even if halfway across he started to run, he put his right foot out and then his left foot and then his right. He walked on the empty avenue. Even if the street were entirely empty, of course, you couldn't be sure of a safe crossing, for a car could appear suddenly over the rise 4 blocks further on and be on and past you before you had taken a dozen breaths. He decided not to count his steps. He looked neither to left nor right. The light from overhead lamps seemed as bright and revealing as the midday sun and just as hot. He listened to the sound of the car picking up speed 2 blocks away on his right. Its movable headlights jerked back and forth suddenly and caught at Montag. Keep going. Montag faltered, got a grip on the books, and forced himself not to freeze. Instinctively, he took a few quick running steps and then talked out loud to himself and pulled up to stroll again. He was now half across the street, but the roar from the Beetle's engines whined higher as it put on speed. So the way that I would describe Montag's movement here is it's very calculated. Montag is moving very thoughtfully and is stepping strategically so as to avoid being caught by the police. All right, awesome. So y'all, we've done just about half of our work together for today. I'm going to turn y'all loose to finish up reading 121, 122, and 123, and then you are going to complete these reading tasks over here. So enjoy the rest of your reading, and I will talk to y'all tomorrow.